All right. Good morning and welcome back, everyone. Now, there were a few topics left in the Delhi Sultanate. Iqta system discuss करना था हमको. What was its nature, its purpose, its contributions, and was it feudal or not? And second was the art and architecture of the Delhi Sultanate. Uh, First of all, the Iqta system. हाँ क्या ये? The word Iqta simply means parcel, a parcel of land, and the sultans introduced the practice of assigning iqtas to various officials, nobles, commanders, and soldiers as land revenue assignments in place of a cash salary, in lieu of cash salaries. For this purpose, the entire agricultural land in the empire was divided into two portions. The Khalisa land and the Baibaki land. Khalisa land was the crown's land. It did not mean that the land was owned by the crown, rather it meant that the entire revenue was supposed to be appropriated by the crown, not to be divided among the officials. Right? Now, generally, Khalisa land was the land where the state's control was the greatest, and it was generally the territory located around the immediate periphery of the Sultan's headquarters, that is Delhi. ठीक है? तो पंजाब से लेकर के यूपी तक का एरिया जो दोआब रीजन है और पंजाब वाला रीजन है, roughly that was the region at the height of the territorial extent that was constituted of the crown's land, the Khalisa land. Baibaki land was the land that was set aside for distribution as iqtas amongst the officials and the nobles. And from here, revenue, is it going to belong to the crown exclusively? Is all the revenue going to belong to the crown या फिर revenue का division होगा यहाँ पर? Division of revenue. between the crown and the officials would take place over here, right? Now naturally these would be located at some distance away from the center, right? So they would be located in the non-core areas of the empire. Now the Iqta system also served as a substitute for provincial administration. Large Iqtas were known as Hitta or Vilayat, and the Iqtadars of these large khittas were alternatively known as the Mukti or Wali. ठीक है? They effectively served as the provincial governors. Their resume of duties included tasks such as the provision of general administration, including law and order and the administration of justice, revenue administration, including the collection and division of revenues, and military administration, including the maintenance of troops, equipping them, paying them, construction of forts, and undertaking of defensive and offensive military movements on their own behalf, and to assist the Sultan in times of war. Okay? Now these were their duties, their responsibilities. Is this much clear? What were the objectives that the Iqta system was introduced to fulfill? क्या क्या objectives थे? Number one, revenue centralization. That is, to ensure that a portion of the revenue generated in the far-flung regions of the empire could be diverted towards the center through the instrument of Fawazil, that is surplus revenue, right? So division of revenues किस basis पे होता था? I think I have told you earlier also. Provinces में at the provincial level what were the major sources of expenditure, major heads of expenditure? क्या क्या होते थे? Wage expenditure, administrative expenditure, the cost of revenue administration, and military expenditure. ठीक है? Now this was only a subset of the entire revenue income generated in each Iqta. So what about the remaining amount? इसको बोलते थे Fawazil, and इसके ऊपर किसका हक होगा? Will the local provincial governor be allowed to keep it, or will he have to give it to the center? He will have to give it to the center. So it was to be remitted to the center. Now during the pre-Turkish early medieval age, was there any similar arrangement to ensure revenue centralization? कुछ ऐसा mechanism था? Pre-Turkish राजपूत पीरियड में कोई ऐसा mechanism होता था? नहीं होता था. Rajput society was characterized and polity was characterized by feudalism, which had the element of revenue decentralization. तो उसको replace करने के लिए, to ensure that a portion of the revenue generated in the provincial regions could be diverted towards the center, this instrument of Iqta was introduced with the element of Fawazil. Clear? एक ये पर्पस था. सेकेंड ऑब्जेक्टिव क्या था? टू synthesize or align the interests of the state with the interests of the provincial nobility. ठीक है? तो the Iqta system, in other words, was supposed to create a bond of reciprocity between the Sultan and the provincial nobles. On the one hand was the Sultan, on the other hand was the nobility. What were the priorities of the Sultan? stability, revenue maximization, and territorial expansion. Could any of this have been possible without the loyalty of the provincial nobility? अगर provincial nobility disloyal हो जाता तो internal stability, revenue maximization या territorial expansion का कोई opportunity बनता या वो window close हो जाता? Close हो जाता. तो सुल्तान was assured of loyalty from the provincial nobility. What did the nobility expect in return? क्या चाहिए था इनको? Return, rewards in the form of higher rank, better income, and more power. And what was that one instrument which the Sultan could use to satisfy these expectations of the nobility? इनको एक चीज दे करके ये रिवॉर्ड कर सकता था, and that was more iqtas. ठीक है, or larger iqtas. So the Sultan, who had complete control over the distribution of the Iqta system, could reward, could satisfy the ambitions of the nobility by giving them more land. Is this clear? So this was the second objective of the Iqta system. Now let us look at the contributions of the Iqta system. Contributions. Let us see. सबसे पहले हमने देखा कि what was the Iqta system basics, then we looked at the objectives of the Iqta system. Now we are looking at the contributions of the Iqta system. तो बताइए क्या क्या contributions किए इसने? Did it provide a good medium to establish the element of revenue centralization or not? Revenue centralization. You can write down. It secured revenue from the royal treasury. It secured revenue for the royal treasury from remote areas. From remote areas. ठीक है. Secondly, it also allowed the sultans to introduce the element of administrative centralization. It was through the Iqta system that the grand policies of the various sultans could be transmitted to the ground level even in the remotest areas. क्यों? क्योंकि now the interests of the nobility were linked with the interests of the sultan. It was in their advantage to listen to the sultan, to obey the sultan. ठीक है. Thirdly, with the creation of the Iqta system, what the sultans had achieved was a way in which to counter the influence of the earlier feudal elements. जो Rajput society के feudal elements थे, which were causing huge problems for the Rajput kings, उनको suppress करने के लिए Iqta system was very effective. Why? Because उसके ऊपर जो feudal society था, उसके ऊपर ये impose किया गया. And it was the responsibility and in the interest of the Iqta holders, the Iqtadars, to keep the traditional Rajput society suppressed. Okay? So it also played a very important role in the suppression of feudalism also. So write down the Iqta system. The Iqta system also played a crucial role in suppressing the pre-Turkish Rajput nobility. Okay? Fourthly, the Iqta system also proved very effective for the tasks of consolidating and expanding the empire. Why? Because the Iqta system, apart from being an administrative and revenue institution, also was a military institution. Iqtadars were supposed to maintain their own troops. So through the Iqta system, the sultans were able to mobilize the vast, tremendous revenue being generated from the entire territory to maintain a large permanent army. Which was not concentrated in the core region, rather spread evenly throughout the empire. And the system of incentives created a situation where the more ambitious nobles were given iktas in the frontier regions, and these ambitious nobles sometimes on their own initiative invaded neighboring kingdoms, the small neighboring kingdoms on their borders, right? So iktadars were also incentivized to undertake military conquests on their own initiative. They were richly rewarded for this. Did the Iqta system have any cultural impact? कोई cultural impact होगा Iqta system का? क्या cultural impact होगा? It became the main diffusion of the Islamic culture across North India, As Iqtas emerged as prominent peripheral centers, provincial centers, the diffusion of Islamic culture became possible because all the Iqtadars were Muslim and all of them were following the same Islamic heritage, had inherited the same Islamic heritage of the early sultans. Number 5 you can write diffusion of Islamic culture. लिखो the provincial governors maintained their own courts and patronized artists, scholars and architects, thus promoting the diffusion of Islamic culture and its assimilation with regional cultures, thus enriching India's cultural diversity. Thus enriching India's cultural diversity. ठीक है. सो इसका ये मतलब नहीं है कि पूरे के पूरे नॉर्थ इंडिया के ऊपर केवल एक होमोजेनस इस्लामिक कल्चर को इम्पोज कर दिया गया एंड दैट रिमेन्स स्टैटिक. Rather, as Islamic culture spread to different parts of the of North India, different results were created, resulting in the emergence of distinct regional cultures, such as a Punjabi culture, a Gujarati culture, a Bengali culture, Marathi culture, etc. Right? How did the Iqta system influence the economy of North India? कोई impact पड़ा उसका? Economy के ऊपर कोई major impact पड़ा? You remember our debate on third urbanization? थर्ड अर्बनाइजेशन में क्या एक वो आइडिया दिया था दैट इक्ता सिस्टम प्लेड अ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट रोल. आंद्रे विंक और सुनील कुमार ने क्या बोला था दैट हॉर्स ट्रूप गैरिसन टाउन्स इमर्ज्ड एज सेंटर्स फॉर प्रोविंशियल अर्बनाइजेशन. राइट. सो द इक्ता सिस्टम और यू कैन से it led to economic renewal or economic growth and urban renewal. कैसे? By encouraging the growth and expansion of agriculture, due to the introduction of better techniques and techniques of land management, etc. The introduction of new crops which were more valuable into areas where till now they were not being cultivated. and by providing the necessary political stability due to the creation of a strong military apparatus and suppression of feudalism. Okay? So with this, Iqta system played a very instrumental role in encouraging the growth and expansion of agriculture. It also encouraged local crafts. Iqta emerged as an important consumer in each peripheral region. तो वहाँ पे जो लोकल डिमांड क्रिएट हो रहा था उसको केटर करने के लिए local communities of artisans began emerging, producing a variety of goods such as cloth, utensils, arms, armaments, leather goods, etc., which were required by the administrators as well as the soldiers of the new Iqta system. ठीक है? It also encouraged local trade, and the Iqtas began emerging as local market centers for their region. Some of the Iqtas emerged as specialized centers for craft production. And since they had pacified the countryside, since the Iqta system had played a very important role in pacifying the countryside and maintaining the political unity of North India under the Sultanate, it also began encouraging regional and later empire-wide trade. Many of the more prominent khittas emerged as large cities which were connected to each other along important trade routes, and this played a very important role in preparing India for participating in the global market once again after a very long period. So the Iqta system also played a crucial role in the internationalization of Indian trade, crafts, and agriculture. ठीक है? So these were the contributions of the Iqta system. Were there any shortcomings in the Iqta system? Some problems in the Iqta system? Limitations? नहीं. देखो, the Iqta system, in order to fulfill its core objective of revenue centralization and alignment of the interests of the Sultan with the provincial nobility, relied upon the instrument of Fawazil, which was based on the concept of the division of revenues, with surplus revenue belonging to the center. However, normal human tendency क्या होता है, especially in highly ambitious people, to minimize their resources or maximize their resources. To maximize their resources. Now the Sultan was also very ambitious, the provincial nobles were also very ambitious. तो अब इनकी लड़ाई किसके लिए होगी? इस सरप्लस रेवेन्यू के लिए. ये रेवेन्यू किसका होना चाहिए? Should it go to the Sultan? How much should go to the Sultan, or should it stay in the provinces with the iqtadars? ठीक है. So first limitation was, write down, competition between the Sultan and the nobility over the surplus revenue created tensions. ठीक है. So instead of strengthening the empire, it ended up weakening it, especially during the reign of weak sultans. दूसरा प्रॉब्लम क्या था इसका? That it had been based on the flawed concept of linking the ambitions of the nobility with land, right? So land is the source of revenue, it is what sustains a population, and it becomes the basis for organizing or raising a military power. ठीक है. Now what are the chief pillars of any state? क्या होता है? Each state should have a well defined territory with absolute sovereignty over the subject population, with the means to defend and expand its territory, expand its influence through the use of military power, right? Now the Iqta system had given to the ambitious iqtadars a ready-made recipe for individual and independent statehood. It had given them territory, it had given them power, it had given them a population to govern, and it had equipped them with a military. It was simply a matter of time that some of the ambitious nobles are going to openly challenge the authority of the Sultan in their own provinces, and at the first signs of weakness this is going to happen. That is why when Muhammad bin Tughlaq's empire started crumbling, it was not a gradual process, it was a very sudden process, क्योंकि इसमें cracks already exist करते थे which were permanent. ठीक है. And the first sign of weakness led to the complete collapse of the empire, and that was largely due to the Iqta system. Write down. Nice. Second point here. The interlinkage of the aristocracy and provincial power, the interlinkage of the aristocracy and provincial power with land led to the emergence of centrifugal tendencies. Led to the emergence of centrifugal tendencies. Emergence of centrifugal tendencies. Full stop. Number, or sorry, next main point लिख लो. Therefore, comma, despite its many contributions to the creation, expansion and sustenance of the Delhi Sultanate, comma, the Iqta system also emerged as the chief instrument of its demise. As the chief instrument of its demise. ये समझ में आया है? Take down a question. Critically evaluate the role of the Iqta system in the expansion consolidation and downfall of the Delhi Sultanate. (200 words, 15 marks. होएगा ये? लिमिटेशंस बताने होंगे डाउनफॉल में, कंसोलिडेशन एक्सपेंशन में, कंट्रीब्यूशन की बात करनी होगी. ठीक है, जो उसके पहले लेकिन आपको इंट्रोडक्शन देना पड़ेगा एक, इन विच यू हैव टू ब्रीफली एक्सप्लेन व्हाट द एकता सिस्टम वाज एंड व्हाट वर इट्स ऑब्जेक्टिव्स. हो जाएगा? ठीक है. नाउ इमर्जेस अनदर मैटर ऑफ डिबेट दैट वाज द एकता सिस्टम feudal in nature. Or were the elements of feudalism present in the Iqta system. So there are two points of view over here. एक point of view कहता है that it was feudal, दूसरा point of view कहता है that it was not feudal in nature. Those historians who have supported the idea that the Iqta system was feudal in nature, उन्होंने क्या बोला है? That it fulfills a certain criteria. Now, for any administrative system to qualify as a feudal system, what are the criteria that should be fulfilled? क्या criteria fulfill होने चाहिए? First of all, the existence of hereditary titles and lands should be there. ठीक. Secondly, there should be a well established hierarchy with overlapping bonds of loyalty between the different ranks of the nobility. Thirdly, the position of the king कैसा होना चाहिए, स्ट्रॉन्ग या वीक? फ्यूडलिज्म में किंग का पोजीशन बहुत स्ट्रांग होगा. विल ही बी वेरी स्ट्रांग? विल ही बी एबल टू इम्पोज हिज विल अपॉन ईच एंड एवरी सब्जेक्ट, इवन द हाईएस्ट ऑफ नोबल्स? और विल हिज पोजीशन बी एक्सट्रीमली वीक? वीक होगा. Then some other attendant features of feudalism include the absence of a large standing army, the absence of revenue centralization, and the absence of a large bureaucracy maintained by the center. Moreover, feudalism is often associated with political fragmentation, and frequent internal conflicts. Thus preparing the grounds for what kind of an economy? A heavily urbanized economy or a ruralized economy? Ruralized economy. Ruralization of the economy with deurbanization, demonetization, and the decline of trade. ठीक है. Now those who have supported the feudal hypothesis for the Iqta system have pointed out that the Iqtadars enjoyed vast powers and independence. They enjoyed exalted titles and vast lands. That they could maintain their own army and forts, that they had revenue assessment and collection powers. They enjoyed other sovereign powers such as administration of law and order and justice, that the sultans rarely interfered in the internal affairs of the Iqtas. ठीक है, ना लिख लिया. Secondly, it is argued that the history of the Delhi Sultanate is characterized by frequent wars and internal rebellions, causing a great degree of political instability. Thirdly, these scholars also point towards the existence of a definite hierarchy in the political, administrative, economic and social structure. At the top was the Sultan, followed by the Muslim nobility, below which were the Hindu nobles, followed by the common peasants, traders and artisans. ठीक है. However, these arguments prove to be rather superficial when examined more closely, thus leading to a strong counter argument that it was not feudal at all. First of all, unlike the feudal system, the sultans were not weak at all. Rather, they were quite strong. And enjoyed vast powers in their own right. They had an enduring capability to project their will in every corner of the empire. And even beyond it. Case in point, the activities of strong sultans such as Balban, Alauddin Khilji and Muhammad bin Tughlaq. And if you look at all their theories of kingship, common element क्या मिलेगा? Excessive despotism, excessive militarism, where their military power was based upon the maintenance of a large central army that was controlled directly by the Sultan. Administrative innovation, which was possible only and only if the Sultan had the real authority to bring about large scale administrative reforms. So agar weak Sultan hota, so would he have been able to bring about policies such as price controls or the creation of new departments, elimination of the Turkane Chihilgani? ये सब कर पाता कोई weak Sultan? नहीं कर पाता. That means that the Sultans were extremely strong, weak नहीं. So one of the requirements for any system to be characterized as feudalism was a weak ruler. ये यहाँ पे सल्तनत में फुलफिल नहीं हो रहा था. ठीक है. Secondly, while it is true that the Iqtadars enjoyed vast powers and exalted titles, were they hereditary in nature? ये टाइटल्स और लैंड्स क्या हेरिडिटरी होते थे? नहीं होते थे. तो titles and lands held by iqtadars were not hereditary. Rather, the iqtadars enjoyed temporary land assignments ranks, official positions, and powers and privileges which were given to them by the Sultan. And the Sultan also had the authority to divest them of all these privileges and powers. They could also be taken away by the Sultan. Secondly, the iqtadars were never posted to a particular region permanently. Rather, they were frequently transferred. Okay? So this means that their presence in a particular region could never attain the element of permanence. They were never able to consolidate their power in a particular region in any effective manner so as to challenge, to exclude the Sultan's authority from being extended to that region. Thirdly, तो ये देखो यहाँ पे एक और एलिमेंट हेरिडिटरी लैंड्स एंड टाइटल्स, this does not exist. Thirdly, the revenue system of the Sultanate period was designed as so as to maximize revenue, centralization through the instrument of fawazil, which itself was part of the structure of the Iqta system. Now, obviously, the personal ambitions of the Iqtadars were against the maximization of fawazil, but different sultans made specific arrangements for the correct assessment and remission of fawazil. For example, Balban introduced a new official at the provinces known as Khwaja to scrutinize the revenue records in each province. Alauddin Khilji introduced the Mashahat system of survey and measurement, thus involving royal officials directly in the process of revenue assessment. Muhammad bin Tughlaq introduced a new official known as the Wali ul Kharaj, and took away the revenue duties of the Iqtadar, of the Mukti, and gave it to this new officer. He also introduced the practice of complete revenue centralization, meaning कि ये जो डिवीजन ऑफ रेवेन्यूज हो रहा था, that would no longer take place at the provincial level. The entire revenue being generated at the center is now going to be sent to the imperial treasury as soon as it was collected, and from there money is going to be sent to the provinces to take care of these expenses such as wage expenditure, administrative expenditure, the cost of revenue administration, मिलिट्री कॉस्ट एक्सेट्रा. ठीक है, तो सेंटर अब पैसा भेजने लगेगा. तो द आइडिया ऑफ रेवेन्यू सेंट्रलाइजेशन वाज टेकन टू इट्स मैक्सिमम लिमिट. ठीक, सो इन दिस वे we have also eliminated this idea of revenue decentralization, right? Fourthly, the sultans maintained a large army and a well-developed administrative apparatus in the form of a large centralized bureaucracy. Both of these were introduced during the reign of Balban, but were also prominent features during the reigns of the successor sultans, including Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, and to a lesser extent even Firoz Shah Tughlaq. The centralized bureaucracy functioned through the new system of portfolio administration or Diwan system, which had been introduced by eliminating the Turkane Chihelgani. While the Chihelgani had hereditary central officials, the Diwan system ensured that the powers of appointment and removal of any central official are always going to be in the hands of the Sultan. So Sultan enjoyed the powers of appointments and dismissals, and the large army became the main instrument of both despotism of the strong sultans and the imperialism of Alauddin and Muhammad bin Tughlaq. ठीक है? So once again, these criteria, absence of a large standing army and a large bureaucracy, they were also done away with. While feudalism is generally associated with de-urbanization, demonetization, the decline of agriculture, the stagnation of agriculture, ruralization of the economy, decline of craft production, decline of trade, the Sultanate period, what did it witness? Rapid expansion of agriculture, rapid expansion of trade, crafts production, and urban renewal, the large scale monetization and monetary unification of North India and later even South India for a short period. ठीक है? Do these development fit the pattern of feudalism? या उसके opposite है? उसके opposite है. ठीक है? So one more pillar of feudalism destroyed. And interesting thing क्या है? That the Iqta system contributed directly to these developments. ठीक है? So these things were not happening despite the Iqta system. These things were happening because of the Iqta system. उसको हम फ्यूडल बोल सकते हैं? नहीं बोल सकते हैं. Now, while it cannot be denied that there were a number of internal conflicts and rebellions within the Delhi Sultanate leading to political instability, weakness and ultimately decline. Should we blame only and only the Iqta system for this? केवल Iqta system का responsibility है? नहीं. We cannot blame the Iqta system alone. since the very beginning, the internal dynamics of the Delhi Sultanate constituted a major struggle for the balance of power between various pillars such as the office of the Sultan, the ulema, the nobility, in which there were contrasting elements or contrasting interests. For example, the conflict between the old nobility and the new nobility, the interests of the nobility at the center versus the interest of the nobility at the provinces, and the मिलिट्री. ठीक है. In fact, the Iqta system had been introduced to minimize this internal conflict ठीक है. It was able to do so for some time but every concept, idea, institution or practice has a definite shelf life. No system is infinitely flexible, right? It is not infinitely mutable, and as soon as there was a major disruption of the balance of power, the Iqta system lost its integrity. Okay? It stopped performing the functions that it was supposed to perform, that is, ensure revenue centralization and align the interests of the provincial nobility with the Sultan. अब जो भी स्ट्रॉन्ग सुल्तान आता है, फॉर एग्जाम्पल बलबन हो जाए, अलाउद्दीन खिलजी हो जाए, मोहम्मद बिन तुगलक हो जाए, व्हाट हैपेंस इमीडिएटली आफ्टर देम? स्टेबिलिटी और इनस्टेबिलिटी. इमीडिएटली आफ्टर देम, उनके पीरियड में तो स्टेबिलिटी रहेगा. एज सून एज दे डाई और एज सून एज दे बिकम वीक, व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन? इनस्टेबिलिटी आएगा, राइट? So the main purpose of the Iqta system was to maintain this delicate balance of power between these various pillars. Now, if any one of them was to become excessively powerful, then it would destroy the utility of the Iqta system. It would cause a major disruption of the Iqta system, and the Iqta system would lose its integrity. So, within the parameters in which the Iqta system was supposed to function, it functioned very well in maintaining this balance of power. लेकिन once those parameters were breached, तो सिस्टम क्यों फंक्शन करेगा? फॉर एग्जाम्पल गाड़ी चलाते हो तो उसमें एक स्पीड रेटिंग होती है टायर्स की, ठीक है, कि मान लो 50 किलोमीटर की स्पीड तक ये अच्छे से चलता रहेगा, लेकिन आप अगर 200 किलोमीटर की स्पीड पे चला रहे हो, कुड यू एक्सपेक्ट दोस टायर्स टू फंक्शन वेल? नहीं. सिमिलरली हमें इक्ता सिस्टम से भी इन्फिनिट एक्सपेक्टेशंस नहीं रखनी चाहिए. इट वाज एन इंस्ट्रूमेंट ऑफ सेंट्रलाइजेशन insofar as there was no major disruption of the balance of power. Once the balance of power was completely disrupted, then the Iqta system also lost its integrity. Okay? So in this light, would it be correct to call the Iqta system as feudal in nature? Feudal कहना सही होगा इसको, या feudal नहीं था? Feudal नहीं था. तो conclusion लिखो. In light of these arguments, it would be inaccurate to characterize the Iqta system as a feudal institution. Rather, within specific parameters, it functioned admirably as a tool of centralization. Thank you, sir. As a tool of centralization. Is this clear? Take down a question. In your view, was the Iqta system feudal in nature? Feudal in nature. $200 words, 15 marks. हो जाएगा ये क्वेश्चन? था या नहीं था? नहीं था. तो फर्स्ट यू विल हैव टू मेक आर्ग्यूमेंट्स कि ये था, फिर उसके बाद नहीं था. ठीक है, पहले फॉर आर्ग्यू करोगे, फिर अगेंस्ट आर्ग्यू करोगे. One more thing we can cover, which I'm not sure we have covered earlier. Evolution of the Iqta system. How did the Iqta system change under various sultans? हाँ, तो शुरुआत कहाँ से होती है? Iltutmish. Write down. He introduced the Iqta system in a systematic manner by dividing a vast portion of land between Punjab and Bengal, a large portion of land between Punjab and Bengal into separate parcels and assigning them among the different nobles. ठीक है? Now, with this emerged a new problem and a new priority. That is to ensure the remission of surplus revenue from the remote areas to the imperial treasury to ensure the remission of surplus revenue from the remote areas to the imperial treasury in a reliable manner. Through the instrument of fawazil. Right? And from this period onward, all the ambitious sultans are going to come up with innovative new ways to fulfill this new priority, to fulfill this or to solve this new problem. So write down. Different sultans came up with innovative methods to fulfill this priority. Next point, बलबन. इसने क्या किया to ensure कि फवाजिल में कोई चोरी नहीं हो रही है? He began appointing a new officer known as Khwaja to supervise the revenue accounts at the Iqta level. Write down. Balban began appointing an officer known as Khwaja to supervise income and expenditure at the Iqta level. Next, Alauddin Khilji. इसने क्या किया? He was the first to directly intervene in the revenue machinery. So write down. He was the first to directly intervene in the revenue machinery. कैसे? मशाहट सिस्टम में रेवेन्यू असेसमेंट यानी कि रेवेन्यू को एस्टिमेट करने की रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी किसकी थी? लोकल ऑफिशियल्स की या रॉयल ऑफिशियल्स की? रॉयल ऑफिशियल्स. राइट डाउन. With the introduction of the Mashahat system of survey and measurement, the responsibility of revenue assessment survey and measurement, the responsibility of revenue assessment was taken away from local officials and entrusted, entrusted was taken away from local officials and entrusted to royal officials. Sub point. Secondly, the revenue accounts of the village patwari were often subjected to surprise inspections. Surprise inspections of the accounts of the patwari, so that if there is any mismatch, all the people responsible could be pulled up and punished. Okay. Next, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq. Now, he had done away with the Mashahat system, so policy of direct intervention of the center in revenue administration, that had been eliminated, but still the problem of ensuring the regular supply of fawazil to the center, that remained. Okay? So how to ensure that the provincial governors are actually spending the revenue generated at the provincial level on the things that they claim that money is required for? वो कैसे हो सकता है? So for this, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq began separately accounting wage and military expenditure. ठीक है, so write down. Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq separated the salary of soldiers from the personal salary of the muktis to prevent them from appropriating any portion of the soldier's salary, ठीक है. So before this, let us see. ये और ये अलग अलग कैलकुलेट नहीं किया जाता था. Both of them were merged together, and this allowed the iqtadars to claim that I am maintaining a certain amount of soldiers of this rank with this pay, so this amount of money is required. अब क्या किया गया, इसको इससे सेपरेट कर दिया गया. Earlier, the Iqtadars were able to appropriate a portion of the soldier's salary, saying that I have already given this money to the soldiers, but they had kept a portion of it for themselves. अब इसको अलग कैलकुलेट किया जाएगा, इसको अलग कैलकुलेट किया जाएगा. This entire money could not be appropriated by the Iqtadar as part of his personal salary any longer. Next, Muhammad bin Tughlaq. What were the changes that he introduced? क्या क्या किया इसने? First of all, ये जो पॉलिसी ऑफ डायरेक्ट इंटरवेंशन ऑफ द सेंटर इन रेवेन्यू एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन था, दैट पॉलिसी वाज रिवाइव्ड. तो सिस्टम ऑफ सर्वे एंड मेजरमेंट, रेवेन्यू असेसमेंट बाय रॉयल ऑफिशियल्स, इसको रीइंट्रोड्यूस कर दिया इसने. सेकेंडली, ही बिगैन अपॉइंटिंग एन ऑफिशियल नोन एज दी वली उल खराज, and thirdly, he introduced the practice of division of revenue before remission or after remission. After remission. The concept of fawazil was now abolished. The entire revenue being generated at the provinces will be sent to the center, and from there money is going to be sent to the provincial governors. So write down. Muhammad bin Tughlaq reintroduced Alauddin's policy of direct intervention in the revenue machinery, thus eliminating the role of local officials in revenue assessment. full stop. Subpoint. Secondly, to curtail the powers of the muktis, he began appointing a new official of equivalent rank in the provinces, known as Waliul Kharaj, who was responsible for the collection of revenue and its remission to the center. Next point. Thirdly, Muhammad bin Tughlaq abolished the concept of fawazil by introducing the practice of division of revenue after remission. Full stop. The entire revenue generated from a province was appropriated by the center, generated by the province was appropriated by the center, which then allocated funds to each province to undertake various administrative expenses. To each province to undertake various administrative expenses. Number 6, फिरोज शाह तुगलक. क्या किया इसने? He undid all the changes made by Muhammad bin Tughlaq and adopted which policy? फिरोज शाह तुगलक के साथ कौन सी पॉलिसी हमेशा जुड़ती है? पॉलिसी ऑफ अपीजमेंट. Adopted the policy of appeasement towards the iqtadars. क्या क्या किया इसने? Iqtas were made hereditary. The revenue obligations from each Iqta were fixed permanently. So every year the Iqtadar was supposed to pay a particular sum of money to the center, and जो भी extra production हुआ है, he was allowed to keep it for himself. Right? Thirdly, the oversight on military administration in the Iqtas would be increased or reduced? Was reduced. So the Iqtadars began enjoying a free hand with respect to their military obligations towards the state. The quality and expenditure of the troops, the number of troops, their training, all of this was allowed to suffer. Corruption was encouraged deliberately by Firoz Shah Tughlaq in order to appease the Iqtadars. Okay? And with this, what do we see? The elements of feudalism became visible within the Iqta system. ठीक है. Next, Bahlol Lodi. Which theory of kingship did he follow? Turkish or Afghan theory? Afghan theory of kingship. What is the basic feature of the Afghan theory of kingship? That the king is not considered supreme, rather he is simply considered to be the first among equals. Therefore, this element of decentralization is also going to be visible in the Iqta system. Is Bahlol Lodi going to appoint and transfer Iqtadars frequently, or is he going to assign hereditary Iqtas to the important Afghan nobles? क्या करेगा? Frequent transfers या फिर hereditary Iqtas? ट्रांसफर करेगा. ट्रांसफर किस तरह का सुल्तान फ्रीक्वेंटली कर सकता है इंपॉर्टेंट ऑफिशियल्स को? स्ट्रॉन्ग सुल्तान या वीक सुल्तान? स्ट्रॉन्ग सुल्तान, अ सुल्तान हु वांट्स टू सेंट्रलाइज एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. डिड बहलोल लोदी वांट टू सेंट्रलाइज एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन? नहीं, डिसेंट्रलाइज. तो ये क्या करेगा यहां पर? हेरिडिटरी Iqtas were distributed among the important Afghan noble houses, important Afghan clans. ठीक है. Secondly, what are we going to see? We will also see the abolition of revenue centralization. So the Sultan is no longer going to insist upon the remission of Fawazil. ठीक है. Is Bahlol Lodi going to introduce a heterogeneous nobility or a homogeneous nobility? Homogeneous nobility. The chief source of his power is his Afghan lineage. He is drawing his support from other Afghan chiefs, and therefore he will have to rely upon them. So a homogeneous Afghan nobility was placed above other groups. So they were given more power and more privileges as compared to other groups of the nobility. Now, a king who is not in a position to mobilize revenue from the whole of his territory, will he be able to maintain a large permanent army? No. So the Sultan continued maintaining a permanent army, but its size was much lower as compared to earlier. Instead, his military reliance upon the other Afghan Iqtadars increased substantially. ठीक है. In fact, there was also a feudalization of central administration to a great extent. While on the surface, the portfolio system of administration or the Diwan system continued, लेकिन the way in which it used to function, that was changed completely. The Sultan did not exercise the power to appoint or dismiss important ministers. Rather, the various ministerial positions became hereditary. Okay? Now, traditionally, the Sultan relied upon the administrative machinery being run by 4 important departments: Wizarat, Arz, Rasalat and Insha. This had formed the backbone of द सल्तनट्स सेंट्रल एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन. बलबन ने इंट्रोड्यूस किया था इसको, राइट. एंड जितने भी दीवान्स होते थे, एवर सिंस द पीरियड ऑफ बलबन, दे वर बीइंग अपॉइंटेड डायरेक्टली बाय द सुल्तान. ठीक है. So Sultan was in complete control of each and every aspect of administration through his appointees. He had the power to appoint, dismiss, promote, demote or even punish his officials, his ministers. बहलोल लोदी में क्या हुआ? ये सिस्टम तो ऐसे का ऐसे ही रहा, but the power of the Sultan to control the important ministers, that was no longer there. ठीक है. So central administration was also feudalized. Is this much clear? Next, Sikandar Lodi. What did he try doing? He tried to centralize control and assert royal supremacy, discard the Afghan theory of kingship. He attempted the centralization of power. How was this reflected in the Iqta system? While Iqtas continued being hereditary, but the Iqtadars were forced to submit surplus revenue to the center. ठीक है. तो एक तो ये हुआ that the concept of fawazil was revived. Secondly, the Iqtadars were brought under greater scrutiny and control as the Sultan began insisting on surprise inspection of military readiness. Right? So the Iqtadars were forced to increase their spending on the military and thus forced to reduce their own personal consumption. ठीक है. Thirdly, in central administration, the concept of hereditary positions or offices was abolished. Fourthly, to distance himself from the destructive influence of the central nobility, which was disgruntled because of the abolition of hereditary positions, he shifted the capital to Agra. Fifthly, he also began promoting non-Afghans such as Turks, Iranis and Indian Muslims to important positions to challenge the entrenched Afghan nobility. Okay, so he began to heterogenize the nobility. Sixthly, in some provinces, when the Afghan nobles rebelled or made postures of rebellion, he severely punished them. He severely punished the rebellious nobles. Further, in the sub-provincial units of administration, such as Shik and Pargana, especially in the economically important Iqtas or the strategically sensitive Iqtas, he took the powers of appointing the officials away from the local Iqtadars and began to appoint the officials directly himself. So he began appointing officials directly. These were the changes that he made. Ibrahim Lodi tried to carry the legacy of his father even further by trying to disinherit many of the Iqtadars over of their hereditary titles. So Ibrahim Lodi tried to abolish hereditary Iqtas. But he was not entirely successful. ठीक है? And it is in this manner that the Iqta system evolved over time under various sultans, beginning from Iltutmish right up to Ibrahim Lodi. Take down a question. Trace the evolution of the Iqta system under various sultans of Delhi. What were the chief factors responsible for this constant evolution? ठीक है? तो फर्स्ट पोर्शन तो आप कर लेंगे. What were the new characteristics which emerged within the Iqta system under every new sultan? Second part, what were the chief factors for this constant evolution? बताओ क्या क्या थे. कहानी शुरू होती है by the desire of the sultans to ensure the remission of fawazil. ठीक है? But the remission of fawazil became a major source of resentment among the provincial nobility. So it led to tensions, and these tensions disturbed the delicate balance of power that existed within the Delhi Sultanate. During the reign of strong sultans, the pendulum swung completely in their favor, but during the reigns of weak sultans or sultans trying to achieve a specific objective, the elements of decentralization and feudalism became visible, as opposed to the element of centralization and royal supremacy under strong sultans. ठीक है? And this was the chief factor, and this can also be aptly demonstrated by the changes which took place after the rule of every strong sultan. For example, Balban's policy of blood and iron resulted in the suppression of the local nobility, of the provincial nobility, but immediately after his death led to the Khilji revolution, the demise of Balban's dynasty. Therefore, Jalaluddin Khilji simply restored the traditional nobility to its former power and restored their privileges. Major disruption came under Alauddin Khilji, who completely, or under whom despotism reached its peak. After his death, it led to the overthrow of the Khilji dynasty and establishment of the Tughlaq dynasty. Once again, a dynastic change. ठीक है, तो इसको आप एक ग्राफ के ऊपर भी प्लॉट कर सकते हो. Under the reign of strong sultans, the power of the sultan is going to be highest, but in contrast, the freedom of the iqtadars is going to be at their lowest. However, this is going to lead to a reaction, disruption. तो बार बार rebellions होंगे, revolutions देखने के लिए मिलेंगे. And this system, this equation is going to try and correct itself. That is why Muhammad bin Tughlaq के बाद Firoz Shah Tughlaq, royal supremacy at its lowest, the provincial nobility at its strongest. Once again, it is going to continue until Bahlol Lodi. Sikandar Lodi is going to try and suppress the interests of the nobility. Ibrahim Lodi is going to do it even further. Thus, once again, the element of royal supremacy is going to be restored. However, by this point of time, the nobility has become accustomed to the element of independent functioning, autonomous rule. While in the earlier phases, the balance of power could still be brought back into balance. Now it could no longer be. And what is this going to do? This is going to lead to the disruption of the entire machinery, creating the perfect circumstances for Babur's invasion and the downfall of the Delhi Sultanate as a whole. ये वाला लाइन है प्रोविंशियल ऑटोनॉमी वाला, ये वाला लाइन है रॉयल सुप्रीमेसी वाला. इज दिस क्लियर? तो अभी बताओ समझ में आया है कि बिगेस्ट फैक्टर क्या था? तो रबर बैंड को कभी आप अगर ऐसे खींच के छोड़ दो तो ऐसे ऐसे वाइब्रेट होता रहता है ना. That is exactly what was happening. So for the first time, as Balban tried to impose the instrument of principle of royal supremacy, the basic characteristic of the Delhi Sultanate was permanently disrupted, और इसके बाद हमेशा correction और over corrections होते रहेंगे in the power dynamics, and that was the biggest factor behind these frequent changes, the constant evolution of the Iqta system. Clear? So that is it. हाँ, सबके बारे में आपको मेंशन करना होगा. मतलब इतने डिटेल में आप मेंशन नहीं कर सकते हो. वर्ड लिमिट इज ओनली 200. यू विल हैव टू बी वेरी सेलेक्टिव एंड यू विल हैव टू प्रेजेंट योर आर्ग्यूमेंट्स इन अ वेरी क्रिएटिव मैनर. छोटे छोटे में आप कंसिडर उसको कर लो. हाँ हाँ, सुल्तान का नाम. हाँ, इनफैक्ट यू कैन ऑल्सो से that the elements of excessive centralization were visible during the reigns of Balban, Alauddin Khilji, Muhammad bin Tughlaq, Sikandar Lodi and Ibrahim Lodi, while the elements of relative decentralization were visible under Iltutmish, Ghiyasuddin Tughlaq, Firoz Shah Tughlaq and Bahlol Lodi. Thus, a specific pattern was established in the evolution of the Iqta system. ठीक है, ये आप बोल सकते हो. तो once you make that clear, तो आपका जो बाकी का जॉब है ना, वो बहुत आसान हो जाता है. हाँ, 2 पार्ट्स में करना चाहिए आपको. हाँ, नहीं 6 फैक्टर्स कौन से? 6 फैक्टर्स कौन से? नहीं, ये 6 अलग अलग फैक्टर्स नहीं है. तो मैंने बताया है आपको कि हाउ द एब एंड फ्लो ऑफ पावर डायनामिक्स विद इन द इक्ता सिस्टम इज टेकिंग प्लेस. जो चीफ फैक्टर है वो यही है कि डिसरप्शन ऑफ दिस पावर डायनामिक्स, द बैलेंस ऑफ पावर, यही है इसका चीफ फैक्टर. ठीक है, it created changes which resonated throughout the history of the Delhi Sultanate. That is what we need to argue. ठीक है, चलिए then, that is it for today. कल के क्लास में हम ये आर्किटेक्चर कवर कर लेंगे सल्तनत पीरियड का. राइट, we'll also try to begin Vijayanagar and Bahmani. All right, any doubts?